My name's Clarence, and I'm here to tell you about how to start a saltwater fish tank. Okay, so first of all, I want to clear up that this is assuming that you know absolutely nothing about saltwater aquariums. This is just a guide on how to get started. So with that in mind, let's get started. You need to have a little bit of understanding about chemistry, because if you understand chemistry, then you can definitely understand what's going on in the water, and it'll make your job a whole lot easier and a whole lot less confusing. Alright, here we go. So, the first thing you're going to worry about is what kind of aquarium you should get to put your fishes in. Like something with a reef tank or corals in it, or something a little bit more simple. It's up to you. The next thing you need to consider is how much money you're willing to spend. Let's be frank here. Fish tanks, especially nice saltwater ones, they're not the cheapest thing out there. So you need to consider how much money you're willing to spend. Like if you wanted to start with a big tank or start small and then go to a big tank. I don't know. It's up to you, but the rule of thumb is this: if you want a small tank, it's going to be cheaper than the big tank. Or if you've got some skills, you can make the fish tank yourself. It actually ends up being a whole lot cheaper. Okay, the next thing you need to worry about is what kind of filtration you want. There's a whole lot of different type of filtration out there, but pretty much if you don't know what it is, it's pretty much like pool filtration. It gets all the crap out of the water so that it stays cool and attractive. Again, you need to think about what you want to get in the future, and so that you can make the right choices as to which filtration you want. You're the only one that knows the answer to all these questions, really. So you need to do a little bit of research before you plan on buying anything. Because the more you know, the better decisions you'll be able to make in the future. So just try and do a little bit of research about those earlier things I talked about. Alright, so let's go a little bit more in depth. How big do you want your fish tank to be? That is the question. That's probably the biggest question you'll ask yourself. Now it all depends to how much money you're willing to spend. Generally a 50-gallon tank is going to be easier to care for the smaller fish tanks out there. There's there's those little nano cubes you can buy that are like 22 to 24 gallons. Around there, they come with everything pre-installed. It's pretty much making your life really easy, but there's not that much room inside to make it kind of cool. Like those nanocubes are kind of things that you would put on your kitchen counter or something to look at while you're cooking, but really you shouldn't be doing that because you're trying to cook food. So if you're gonna get a fish tank, I say try and get out the big guns and try and get something at least as big as 50 gallons, because once you reach that level, everything's gonna be a whole lot easier for you. Trust me. Alright, another thing that's really important is, let's say you're going, okay, yeah, I'm gonna get a 100-gallon tank. I'm just gonna tell you this right now. 1 gallon of salt water is equal to 8.5 pounds. Cool. But if you do get a 100-gallon fish tank, you better put it in your basement, because that thing's gonna weigh 850 pounds. And if you get 850 pounds in your little apartment on the 3rd story of the building, it's going to crash through the floor. So you need to consider that. That's, something that can be easily overlooked, and it's happened in the past. So just make sure you have the necessary foundation for your fish tank. Okay, the next thing you need to worry about is the shape of your tank. Generally, people go with, an elongated cube. That's usually the perfect thing, but there's things out there that you can look into, like curved glass. Personally, I'm not a fan of those because everything just looks distorted. But you need to account these things into detail, like for example, like how much water is touching the air. By that I mean like the surface area in which the gas exchange can, is sufficient enough so that your fish can breathe, right? So the oxygen goes into the water. You need to consider that. So I wouldn't really recommend a tall and narrow fish tank, because there's just not going to be that much oxygen going inside of it. The next thing you need to worry about is the material your viewing window is going to be made of. Now there's lots of different things, but the two most popular ones are these: the glass and acrylic. There's ups and downs to both, but obviously glass is going to be a lot cheaper. and also it doesn't scratch as easy versus acrylic. It's a little bit more expensive, and some people think that it looks a little bit better than glass. I don't know, they're both see-through, I won't judge, but it's also a lot more prone to scratching, and you'll understand that later on because algae grows on the glass over time, and you need to find a way to get rid of it, right? And you won't be able to use as many devices out there that you could for glass. Okay, so let's go back a little bit when I was talking about filtration and light. Lighting is going to be one of those pretty expensive first things you're gonna have to buy, but it's one of the most important as well, because let's say that in your mind you want to go eventually in the future have corals and whatnot going around your fish tank. That's cool. I have some of those. They're really neat to look at. But you need to understand that corals need light to survive. So there's all kinds of different lights out there sold. Some that are like almost as powerful as the sun. Some that are not so powerful that'll make your coral starve. You need to understand that if in the future you really do want to go with corals and whatnot, I would recommend starting out with a good light. Now, wherever your local fish store is, you can go in there and ask them all the questions. But basically, if you want some corals, but you don't want the really expensive kind, then you can go out there with what's called T5 lights, and they're pretty much right in the middle, a little higher end. But then if you really want some really intense corals, then you can go out there with what's called metal halides. I'm sure your local fish store is gonna explain to you everything that you need, but pretty much keep that in mind when you're going out there to buy stuff. Okay, now let's talk about filtration, because that was one of the things that confused me the most out there. Pretty much, let's think about this. You have little things called bacteria, and they eat fish poop. They eat fish poop, and then their poop is kind of like in the form of gas, so it floats right out of the water. That's the basics. Now, the more rocks and everything that you have in your fish tank, the better, because you'll have more areas for those said bacteria to live in. Also, you need to consider how deep your sand bed is going to be. Usually, it shouldn't be more than 1 or 2 inches deep, because if you have a really deep sand bed, what's going to happen is that some of the poop that I was talking about that the bacteria makes is going to get stuck underneath the sand, and it's going to like decay, and then if something moves the sand around and all that gas is suddenly going to come up, that's not going to be good. So generally 2 to 3 inches of sand is pretty good. Okay, so what I'd recommend for filtration, however, in terms of like mechanical filtration, things that you'll have that are man-made to help the water be clear, you can pretty much look it up and research it. I'll put some links in the description. But the thing that I would recommend, the first is a protein skimmer, and then like a power filter, something that's not too bad. Of course, you can go without a power filter, because those require a lot of like maintenance, because all they do is pretty much trap the waste in there, and then like after a while, if you don't clean it up, then the fish waste is going to go right back into the water, and it's not going to be bueno. So you need to keep that in mind too. But if you've got the guts and the glory, I definitely recommend one of those, because they just take everything out really quick, so it's good to have. Also, the cool thing is that you can have everything located in something that's called a sump. A sump is pretty much an area for all your filtration, or even little whatever you want to do really, that's located underneath your fish tank, so it doesn't have any filters that you can see that's on the back. So it's pretty nice aesthetically, but of course it's gonna cost you some extra cash. Alright guys, well thanks for watching. Rate, comment, subscribe, whatever you want to do. Of course anything positive is appreciated. This is just part 1. Next I'll be talking about what kind of fish you can get and etc. corals. It's gonna be neat. So thanks again, and I hope this really helped you out.